People who have worked for the ultra-wealthy, what are some of their deepest, darkest secrets? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. There's a few, but having a private pictures painting of yourself in the foyer of guest house was one. I couldn't believe it. LOL. Answer. Dude, I'm from the middle of a fudge nowhere, rural Alabama, where there just happens to one extremely wealthy family that owns a ton of property and businesses. The patriarch's wife had a private pictures portrait of herself hanging up in their mansion. Why is this a thing? Edit. I don't say matriarch because she was like his third or fourth wife and way younger than he was. Story 2. I did a personal IT service for an incredible wealthy guy in Tucson. House overlooking the city from the foothills, 8 RFT single-pane windows, etc. He had a ranch of at least 40K acres in Texas, and most of his was from oil. His biggest secret was that he knew most people only liked him for his wealth, including his present wife, 2 kids and 2 stepkids, and they'd cut ties in a heartbeat if it disappeared. Story 3. They're unusually cheap, or most I've worked for are. I'm in wine sales and cellar management, and I had a client who had over $10 million in first growth Bordeaux and Grand Cru Burgundy. And he served 20 Pinot and Bubbles, Cava, at his Xmas party for his best friends and celebrities. He died with a $10 million cellar. Answer. I managed a Blockbuster a long time ago that was on the border between a lower middle class and a rich neighborhood. One day, some middle-aged guy started yelling and threatening to fight one of my employees. He was being an abusive prick. So I went to find out what the deal was. Guy was screaming over a 2.14 late fee. I mean, just absolutely plastering insults all over my employee. I told him he owed it fair and square, and to pay or get out or I would call the cops. He stormed off, cursing loud enough for the whole store to hear. I step outside to make sure he leaves and watch in shock as he gets into a pristine white Rolls Royce. That lesson stuck with me. Story 4. Had to entertain an oligarch for an afternoon once, but had no idea he was a legit oligarch with destroy the world amounts of wealth. The only secret I gleaned was you never know who somebody is. He dressed, acted, and enjoyed in all the ways a normal person on a budget would. I didn't get the impression that was an act for me, but he definitely appreciated that I didn't know or give a fudge who he was. I took him to a dive bar and for tacos after. My boss said the oligarch reported a great time and made sure I got the recognition. Answer. A proper rich person? Remember in Titanic, when Rose says that all her family make fun of Molly Brown because she is new money? That's so many rich people nowadays. Gaudy, tacky displays of wealth, fancy brand clothes and dripping with gold, living in a McMansion, driving a Ferrari. We have a millionaire in the extended family. Got it through hard work. He lives in a totally normal, albeit large house. He wears normal clothes and drives a normal car. Nicest guy you'll ever meet. Story 5. Changed out some home security stuff for a very wealthy older couple. Like 10B. The wife was incredibly kind, and if encountered in the wild, she would be totally normal appearing. It was the little things in their home that blew me away. Handcrafted everything. They even sent me and my guys home with a bunch of stuff from their garden. Answer. There's a saying, money talks, wealth whispers, and in my experience, it's totally true. The richest people I know aren't super flashy. They invest in quality products, not flashy ones. I mean, shoot, my grandma is crazy rich, and she still drives a 15-year-old Toyota. It's not until you get house and see her multi-million-dollar art collection that you realize how much she has. The woman gave me a 20 Kanye painting once just because I said I liked it. Story 6. I worked at a fishing lodge where you had to be rich to stay. I was the sole cleaner. Every day I had to turn over 14 cabins by myself. Anyways, we were supposed to be invisible, like try to not let the upper class be saddened by my tired existence, LOL. But the wives wanted to come in my laundry room and tell me the tales of their horrible husbands. Just come in and sit on the dryer with a wine? My boss didn't like it, but it's not my fault and fun to chat too. Ha ha ha. So I guess their secret is they wish they could just be normal, relate, be broken, cry with someone who cares. Paying to stay with views of a rainforest, yet they chose to hang out in my laundry room. One of the guests asked me out. He was my age, inherited wealth. I have had moments where I thought I regretted that, but then I remember how miserable those dryer dames were. I did notice a small difference between earned and inherited wealth. The kids that stayed with inherited wealth were the most inconsiderate people I've ever encountered. The room would be full of chips just strewn on the ground, pillows and bedding everywhere. You could tell they were used to having a maid. They're used to having what they want when they want it, with no need to consider time-cost logistics. One guest of honor was telling his guests pretend friends about a magician from France at the dinner table. Next thing I know, my boss is telling me to get a room ready. They're flying him from France to Western BC that night. Guy arrives off the helicopter on the floating dock in the middle of butt fudge nowhere, and he's like, wow, I've always wanted to come to Canada. He arrived late, and I accidentally walked in on him getting out of the shower during turn-down time when everyone's at dinner. Hess chill and laughs about it, but the next night he sees me trying to invisibly pass the dinner table and he calls me over and won't let up. Then proceeds to tell jokes based on the naked interaction and insists I help him with the routine. And I'm like pretty sure this trumps the invisibility rule since you're special speed ordered from France. So I'm up in front of all the billionaires in my grubby cleaning rags and my boss is just glaring at me from the kitchen. Ha ha. Same guest that ordered the Insta-Magician also screamed at my server friend for opening his wine incorrectly. You've just ruined 10,000 of wine. Rich people get tucked in. Every evening while they were at dinner, I would go and remake every bed from made position to turn down. So it's a cute little rich person, cuddle bun, inviting them onto those thread counts. Edit apparently, poor people also can get turned down, service my bad. It's just after working for 14 hours 35 days in a row. I wasn't a fan of the practice is all. The one thing that would be cool, if that rich dude is on here, hit me up. We pre-ordered their favorite snacks, so when they arrived, they had endless supply of everything they'd ever dreamed of. I put bags and bags of special licorice in one cabin. Some of them had very basic snack preferences, though not gonna lie. Raisins, really? Oh, and I got to eat the leftovers from their fancy course meals, 10 p.m. every night. Needed those calories to fuel the free emotional labor output required to soothe the trophy wives. I had to stack all their coins in their rooms into little rows, by value not sure why. Some guests were absolutely lovely though. One couple gave me 1,000 tip. I needed to work out to deal with the stress, but the staff treadmill broke, so I started swimming laps around the lodge. My boss said it made the guests feel uncomfortable thinking about how cold I was, so I couldn't swim in their view. I said then, fix the treadmill, and he did. Anyways, we didn't get time off like we'd work 40 days in a row. I asked how to get around it, and my buddy said if you're in a wedding, they'll let you out on the garbage boat. So my friend had a shotgun fictional wedding, and I never came back. Edit to everyone asking him, not going to say the name. I've heard rumors they've improved how they treat their staff. I was there 10 years ago. So for now, it's anonymous. But from the amount of guest lodges from other lodge victims, it seems my experience is not unique. Answer. I once stayed at a place like that. There was a questionnaire to fill out before arrival. Do you drink soda? Which brand? How much? Coffee? Beer? Whiskey? Even, how do you like your steak? The first time I sat down to dinner, they put a steak in front of me, rare. My friend was served hers medium. The server had not asked our names or how we would like our steak. The kitchen prepared meals to our preferences without asking. The staff had studied our passport pictures and profiles, so they knew us and our preferences. Story 7. I used to be close friends with a kid who was best friends with a kid a little younger, whose mom's family was probably worth $5 billion. We would go over to his house and do whatever activity you could dream of. It was there. Every single night there were sterno pans with dinner from one of the local high-end restaurant if a chef didn't come in and make something. We would take the family jet to his apartment in a large city every couple months. Limo to hangar, get on, laid out food on flight, limo directly off plane, and to apartment. One time his green stuff dealer in the city was out of town, so he asked me to bring an ounce for him, back when it was 400s for high-end. I had made the flight before, so I knew security was no issue. But as a 20-year-old kid guessing, that was a huge expense. I felt awful bringing it up after everything we didn't pay for, and I did smoke, but not at his rate. We always sat courtside at basketball games, went to a club afterwards and spent north of $25,000, ate at the best places, etc. So I just ate it. We were in eat back to plane after that weekend, and he was fudge around with his bag and pulled out $1,000 in an envelope and was like, my bad man, I totally forgot to get you this. He was young dude, kind, soft-spoken. Haven't seen him in probably 15 years. Story 8, a surprising number of them are hoarders, like mansion-level filth hidden behind marble gates. Rich doesn't mean clean. Answer. Yeah, my buddy used to live with his multi-millionaire grandma in her weird, huge house. Trash everywhere. Weird art on every wall. Walk down a hallway and there's just a miniature but still like the size of a car wooden Viking ship. I swear to Christ there was a room waist deep with just doll heads. Just the heads. I asked my buddy about it, and he said she wouldn't talk about it, and it had been that way since before he was born. I wasn't super close with the guy, so I was only there like 4 times, but I would have paid money to clear everyone out and just go through the bizarre place. Like, this is the chute you can see. I would be absolutely unsurprised if there were secret passages in that house. After his grandmother died, there were people who simply refused to go to what was now his house because there's no fudge way that place isn't haunted. Story 9. He was divorced and married a second wife. He never divorced, and the second wife is a mistress that he parades around as his wife. Actual wife doesn't give a shoot as long as they're still rich, but won't let his second batch of kids inherit their joint assets, so he had to buy his second wife some income properties for security. She'll be okay, though. He bought her $100 million worth of income properties. Story 10. I got upgraded recently by a very kind hotel staff member. Got to stay at the hotel's exclusive floor. The rooms were really nice, but it was all the extra stuff. Exclusive lounge with free canapes, a selection of custom scents for your room, and a lovely dedicated concierge who seemed deeply confused. I didn't need him to do anything for me. Access to a spa. Later, I was sitting in that lounge, and a woman walked up to the concierge, gave him a piece of paper with her measurements on it, and asked him to have some workout clothes shoes sent up to her room so she could use the gym. As if they just have a magical chamber downstairs with everyone's exact size of shoes and clothes sitting there. She seemed perplexed when he explained they didn't and suggested a Lululemon store a few blocks away. She then said, "Excellent. Send someone over to pick some things up. I prefer earth tones. Just charge it to my room." She didn't even wait for a reply before walking away. It's mind-blowing. They are just used to getting everything they need all the time at a moment's notice. They are utterly dumbfounded when they hear the word no. Answer: oh yes. I watched a documentary once about a very fancy London hotel where a guest who was attending a wedding realized that she had left her shoes at home. These were, of course, super fancy shoes made with the same fabric as the dress she had bought for the wedding and not easy to replace. She told the concierge, gave them her home address and keys, and a member of staff flew that same day to her home, I think in New York, retrieved the shoes and flew back straight away and made it in time so this woman could wear them. Story 11. I worked at a place that sold very expensive watches and jewelry, which was frequented by the rich and famous. I would get in trouble sometimes because I didn't recognize them. Basketball players' wives, for example. These were a specific type of rich person, the ones who wanted others to know exactly how rich they were. I learned that there are brands that cater specifically to these people and are mostly only recognized within their own circles. A lot of ultra-wealthy people don't dress up when they go out. They can be plain or even sloppy. It was important to never assume someone's status. They are petty and will throw you under the bus in a millisecond if it will even slightly benefit them. While I worked there, I was screamed at, had things thrown at me. I saw grown men throw huge tantrums. They do it because they know they will get something out of it. Your work had to be beyond perfection because they would purposely try to find faults to exploit. I disliked that their behavior was always rewarded. I preferred it when their assistants were the ones we helped. Many of them seem incredibly isolated and lonely. Some would come and talk politics at us because they had no one else who would listen. Though to be honest, we weren't allowed to express any of our own thoughts, so it was pretty one-sided conversation. Answer: they are petty and will throw you under the bus in a millisecond if it will even slightly benefit them. While I worked there, I was screamed at, had things thrown at me. I saw grown men throw huge tantrums. They do it because they know they will get something out of it. Your work had to be beyond perfection because they would purposely try to find faults to exploit. I disliked that their behavior was always rewarded. I preferred it when their assistants were the ones we helped. This is exactly the behavior that capitalism rewards. In regards to throwing tantrums, that's where it's very easy to see how class works in America. I once worked with a couple younger guys who were raised by wealthy and connected families. The two of them could interact in ways with the executive leadership in the exact same way as other employees. They would be seen as direct and communicative, whereas others would be seen as uppity for engaging in the same way. Story 12. I have flown private jets for various wealthy individuals. People you would likely never know. They don't exist in the public sphere in the way someone like Bezos does. They don't always have some deep, dark thing that is unique to wealth. They're human, and the things, the emotions, the tendencies they exhibit are the same across the entire human spectrum. I've come away seeing wealth just makes you more of what you are. If you're mean, you're more mean. If you're nice, you're more nice. They still have problems, and some of that is tied to their wealth, which is family drama, having access to the wealth, and raising children to be humble or entitled. They are more insulated from legal or political consequences. Answer: that's why a lot of new age people these days have come to look at money as just a form of energy. It isn't inherently good or bad, it just gives you the ability to impose your will on reality on a larger scale, whatever that may be. It's like gas in a car. The more you have, the further you can go, but it's ultimately still up to the driver which direction to go. Story 13. I worked in the wedding business for 8 years. After a while, I was able to sniff out ultra-wealthy clients during initial phone calls, mails, and always turn them down. Newly rich people have one objective: impress others. That's it. Nothing was ever good enough. Most wedding clients had timelines, which at most were broken into 30-minute blocks. I had one wealthy mother-in-law who had her timeline in 5-minute blocks. Yes, 5-minute blocks. After the wedding, she emailed me 6 pages of criticism, absolutely heartbroken that her daughter's golden hour sunset photos were delayed by 10 minutes because our champagne service was not efficient enough. I had one bride email me 6 months after her wedding to complain that we provided her a new staff member for her reception. Mind you, this person was extra labor. She was provided an extra server for free, as I always paid extensively for new hires to have on-the-job training before they were given real shifts. One rich bride was enraged that my employees put 2 and not 1 orange slices in her cocktail. By contrast, blue-collar people were almost always the nicest, laid-back, sincere, grateful, and high-tipping clients with actual friends and family who had a wedding for all the right reasons. Old money people and self-made successful people, me, people who worked at construction then launched their own businesses, were night and day different from new money, mostly IT douchebags, obsessed with impressing the Joneses. Answer: I used to work for a non-profit, and some people there would periodically go around to mega wealthy people to encourage them to pledge their money to philanthropic causes. Not any particular cause, just something that was close to their heart. What I heard was that old money was the hardest sell. Self-made billionaires were ready to give it away because they were confident that they could just make it all back if they needed to. If you've inherited your wealth, though, all you know is how to spend it. So those guys didn't want to give it up. And then there's Oprah, who was the exception to the rule, self-made billionaire who, at the time, didn't want to give a dime of it to anyone. Story 14. I did a week worth of work on the ranch of the guy who invented the fleshlight. Man was loaded. He had a giant house with a Spanish fountain out front, a spa-gym office with a huge Roman-style pool and statuary, an attached walled garden with stone Buddha statue, and an Indian tiger tower, a massive barn, and his own disco club. It was quite the compound. His dark secret was that he was kind of boring and down to earth for what he's famous for. Every day, he'd drive a UTV around and look at the birds. His wife was quite nice too, though maybe a little out of touch. She complained about how hard it was to buy legitimate antiques, the aforementioned statues, etc., because countries were cracking down on exporting cultural relics. They treated me well, would come around to check and see if I had enough water, would come chat with me for a bit each day. Honestly, pretty nice people. Story 15. Worked for? No, but I worked for a high-end furniture store and delivered furniture to them for years when I was young. Most of them try to squeeze as much as they can out of you while paying as little as possible. So many times we would show up with furniture and they'd be trying to get us to move the whole fudge house around for them like we were United Van Lines. If we refused, they would call the manager and tell them we have to do it, or they'd refuse the furniture. We can just leave, and they'd leave a bad review. Eventually, the manager made it clear to all customers, we are delivery service, not a move your shoot-around service. Once that was solved, they'd try to bribe us with tips. A few times when we were broke, we agreed, and then they'd not give us the tip either by pretending they forgot and hope we wouldn't say anything, or they'd make up some bullshit reason to not tip us. Yeah, when you carried that 300 lb armoire down to the basement, the third step is creaking now. It didn't do that before. We're going to have to use that tip money to contribute to the carpenter who is going to fix that step. Then when we'd give them the bill, they'd act like we were asking them for a small kidney and carry on about how much it was like we were stealing from them. Like they didn't fudge know how much it cost when they ordered the thing. I fudge dislike rich people. I know some of them are okay, but based on my experiences, I'd say a good 90 of them are the cheapest, most power-abusing assholes I've had the misfortune of dealing with. Answer: oh man, we could probably drink up all the beer in a bar swapping stories of all the jerk rich people we've delivered furniture to. I used to work for a small moving delivery company in LA. We did a lot of work for interior designers, so we dealt with celebrities and just obnoxiously rich people. Kanye, all the Kardashians, Ellen, Ringo, Ryan Murphy, etc., etc. One time I swore I found a rather large intimacy toy under Courtney Cox's bed, but it wasn't. I think it was like a broom or something. Another time I actually moved somebody's bottle of lube because we were going to lay down a rug, so we had to move the nightstands. I only realized what it was after my hand got all greasy. Then I read the bottle. Those guys were really nice, so I just washed my hands and didn't mention it. Story 16. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. Have not worked for any but my stepfather's one. I remember one instance where he was planning a flight and his plane needed maintenance before flying. And instead of waiting the time, I think it was a couple weeks or so, for the plane to be fixed, he just bought another plane. He believes that money can solve everything, which to no surprise, it does not. He has this idea that he can just pay people to either shut up or ignore issues, including family. He has constant arguments with my mom that often involve him completely ignoring the problem and giving her some rather large gift thinking that it will solve the issue. It usually doesn't. His kids are completely messed up. They spent their entire lives never being told no. And now they are becoming adults and have been slapped in the face, metaphorically, with the fact that most people actually have to work for a living. They don't get the concept of it. The whole thing about having assets in different countries and hiding transactions under the guise of charity is completely true. I don't think he does it out of malice, but purely because he believes his only worth is his money. In actuality, he's a really kind person, but he sees all relationships as transactions. I often feel sad for him when hearing from various family members about how he sweeps real problems under the rug and covers it up with money, because he thinks it's the only solution. It's also quite sad seeing how much of life you miss when you feel like you can go anywhere without needing protection. We come from a third world country in which the rich are specifically known as such and targeted often. And as a result, there is always a need for hiding either yourself or your money. Just as an example, my stepfather's mother, I guess my step-grandma, has not left the gated property that she lives in for maybe 5 years because she is afraid that if she leaves, goes out in public, she will be kidnapped for ransom or other similar situations. She lives about a 45-minute drive away from one of the most beautiful beaches in the world and has never gone to see it. And she's so lonely. She has a hired staff member specifically to keep her company. As in someone is paid to hang around with her because she's lonely and doesn't know how to make friends that aren't in it for the money. Money does solve a lot of problems, but it also gets to a point where it creates them. Story 17. My dad cleans houses ranging from the tiniest studio apartment to houses with their own security guard and driveway in SoCal. The biggest houses, the cheapest and most judgmental people. I once went to a house where their master closet was bigger than our house, 1800s QFTOs. The owner was the nastiest person I've ever met. Middle-class people were the best. They always tipped and gave free food to my parents. Story 18. This is 50 years ago, worked for dozens of the most wealthy, think 100 whims and up crowd. Very consistently joyless, entitled, arrogant, and cheap, often overlaid with substance abuse issues, with notable exceptions. One of the richest, multiple billionaire, would occasionally come out and work with me. I was doing landscaping, maintenance, whatever. He asked me to help plant some strawberries, worked with me the whole time, and described high finance, how to shift risk to the other guy while retaining control and the lion's share of the profit. Easygoing, super nice guy. Answer, I work in high-end home building. We do fancy kitchens and baths. And one time I went to take some measurements for additional work in a house we'd done a few years before. The client lets me in. Never met him before. And the kitchen is absolutely thrashed, dirty pans and plates, eggshells, loose cereal all over, honey dipper in a puddle on the countertop just wrecked. These houses are always professionally clean and neat to the point of sterile, no personal items, no stains, nothing out of place, so this was unusual to say the least. Of course, I said nothing, but the guy's like babbling apologies for the mess. Right ye? And next thing you know, this multi-billionaire has a sponge and a spray bottle and is cleaning it up himself. So, while explaining that he had just finished making breakfast for their 3 kids and hadn't had a chance to clean up yet. And I got the impression that was a normal thing. The cooking, the giant mess, the him cleaning it up, kept it professional, but in my head I was kind of floored. Most relatable billionaire moment ever. We chatted for a bit and he seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Story 19. They're cheap and stingy, but strangely generous to the chosen few they let in. Also, they don't think they're ultra wealthy because they're constantly comparing themselves to anyone who has more and more better than them. Also, their wealth to them is also subjective in the context of their own perceived rise and fall. They are very insecure about anything they've lost. They will feel their empire has fallen as they age. Answer: I know a guy who used to be a lawyer. He was disbarred, but he did some legal work for Sheldon Adelson back in the day. I asked him what he was like, and the main takeaway Steve had about him is what you said here. That despite being a multi-billionaire, the dude was cheap and stingy AF. Steve told me that he had heard a rumor while working for him that he stole toiletries and towels from his own hotels. Story 20. I don't know if it's a deep secret, but they did seem to hide the reality from the image. They seemed like a stand-up family guy who created an empire from nothing. Their child committed tragic end on Father's Day. And it was a clear statement of why they were doing it on that day from people who were close enough. But the passing was very much hidden and written off as an accident and portrayed as something other than what it was. It wasn't an accident. It was a tortured soul's last outcry to their horrible, abusive father, who was a piece of shit as an employer. So I can only imagine the horror he was as a parent. They chose that day to end their life, and even though I was a child when it happened, I remember realizing how much the day they chose was impactful in the grim circumstances. Story 21. Worked for 3 to 4 billionaires. Was in construction management and did multi-year remodels of some homes and some new builds. I've been on their jets, yachts, visited 3 of their 9 homes, drove their cars, helped move Picassos across the 30,000 Cheskefti house, you name it. My biggest takeaways are 1, that many of them have no real understanding how the real world works. 2, it's often a lonely, fearful, and sad life. They stress over who is trying to take advantage of them. My wealthiest client ever drove a Prius because she was afraid of being targeted. They paid to have 247 security at the house because they fear the eat the rich crowd and live in paranoia. Their kids have nothing to aspire to, no dreams, and any accomplishments are mere expectations. I got out of it because the stress was unbearable when pulling a rabbit out of your jerk becomes what you're known for, and the expectations are that you will always be able to do that. They throw money at your bosses and your boss agrees to the impossible, and then you have to get it done. Story 22. I attended a private boarding school with many ultra-wealthy students. Just so much abuse of every kind. Beat, starved, locked out, tortured, essayed. People don't call because there's no point because the authorities won't even go, let alone actually do anything. The richer they are, the more fudge their kids are if there is anything off in the family. Story 23. Paul Allen and his family were the worst. The news articles about the intimacy harassment are true. Their in-house lawyer left all the correspondence and documents out in an unlocked office, while the cleaning crew and U.S. security staff chaperoning them were there. I guess they figured no one late at night there read English. Story 24. I have provided construction services and the NDA was always in place. Almost all of the clients were lonely and their wives were unhappy. The children had nannies and were well cared for, and the men all had PAs. Latest thing I've noticed, the wealthy love pickleball, the sport. I have ate food and drank adult beverage with these people, and it is fascinating. Oh, the women love online shopping. There were deliveries every day. Helicopters are a big deal too, especially A-Star. If any women are reading this post, I have never seen so many women's high-end shoes in my life, like hundreds of pairs in dedicated closets. Sorry I'm rambling. I think I have sunstroke. Story 25. That they are painfully detached from regular struggles and genuinely seem to think that their success is tied to meritocracy. Even when born into extreme wealth and when it is earned, they will not accept luck played a factor. Also, they fundamentally can't understand the word no, and you have to explain things to them so that they think that they are right. For example, when the shorts try to break specific rules, you will often have to say, I will make sure to share your suggestions, so hopefully we can change that rule in the future. Also, no one loves free shoot more than rich people. Story 26. I worked for a large company owned by a single family, and they couldn't all fly in their private jet at once, just in case the plane went down. They also had a small preamble to important meetings about what would happen if the patriarch died during or after the meeting and the succession plan. Story 27. I worked as a PA for a billionaire. He was delusional, but his wife was something else. She would have breakdowns and start screaming and crying in her office, which was glass so the whole floor could see and hear her. It could be over something as simple as her lunch being late or wrong. Luckily, I was not her PA. She went through a few of them quickly. One time she was supposed to speak at a company event, and it was raining. I was told we pushed her slot to avoid rain, so called her hairdresser, who was doing her hair at a rented mansion. She still showed up for the original time and had an absolute meltdown abilities being rainy and muddy, and her slot being pushed. My boss was pissed at me and don't want to hear any of it in terms of me calling ahead. Just took it and said sorry. Told me sorry is for losers. Okay, bro, there's a show and documentary about them, which gives a glimpse into who they are. Gave me PTSD watching them. Story 28. They can actually be quite cheap when nobody's looking. Penny pinching is pretty common. They will use the lowest bidders on stuff like cleaning and lawn service, then stiff people on payment over minor disputes. They're also poor tippers when nobody's around. I've been out to dinner with a wealthy friend. The table order was quite expensive, but she only tipped a $5 bill. She slid it quickly under a napkin so nobody could see how little she left. Now, if she'd been with her other wealthy friends, I'm sure the tip would have been much larger. That same friend also bought me a drink once while we were out. A soda, not an alcoholic beverage. It was $1.50, no big deal for someone with a bank account bursting at the seams. When we got back to her place, she asked me to repay her because she was nearing her budget for the week on snacks and stuff. I did, gave her 2 $1 bills. She kept the change. Answer. I used to clean houses in the wealthiest county in my state. The richer the client, the crappier they treat you, and the chance of getting a tip decreases with square footage. The poor old lady with a tiny house who hired you because she physically can't clean, 40 and a snack. The rich guy with an 8-bedroom mansion won't look at you and definitely won't leave a tip. Story 29. I've done work for quite a few wealthy people. A couple were lovely, a few were just regular. Most are assholes, and one and his wife were straight up evil. Satan spawned scumbags. Story 30. So I don't work with ultra wealthy, but I've lived next to one for 10 years and just realized it maybe a year ago. Nicest neighbors ever. Standard suburban house, decent cars, but not flashy. It was only when I noticed they were gone for like 2-3 months I asked the wife, and she said she was traveling with her husband to India, Japan, Italy, Iceland, amongst others. Turns out he's a CEO of a massive global company, and they must be worth close to $500 million or plus. Story 31. I didn't work for the ultra wealthy, but my mother, who was extremely beautiful but not wealthy, grew up as a socialite, the kind who was a debutante and was supposed to marry an ultra wealthy man. Instead, she married my dad, who was a struggling artist. But one of her best friends came to visit our humble home when I was 12 years old in 1992. She was an heiress to a huge fortune, and she had just come from Paris, where she had seen the Calvin Klein runway show. She had liked the clothes so much that she bought the entire collection. However, since it was literally the pieces worn by the models instead of off the rack, they didn't really fit the way they should, and sometimes her shirt just fell off. Luckily for her, she had just gotten a new boob job and was happy to show it off. She was on a lot of prescription pills and drank adult beverage from dawn to dusk, and also chain smoked. We didn't have a guest room, so she shared my bed. She would periodically wake up, take pills, and smoke, burning holes in my comforter. One night, she suddenly screamed in her sleep, "You better get that meanie out of my house or I'm calling the cops." 12-year-old me thought she was fascinating and hilarious. The night she woke me up screaming and cursing, I got out of bed and went in the living room to find my father watching the LA riots on TV because he said, "It's a lot more peaceful than what's going on here." Story 32. Nepotism out the jerk. Routing all sorts of favors, money laundering, and bribes through various 501c3s and family foundations, and making sure they are photographed at their charitable events so everyone sees their philanthropy. Story 33. The author Robert Carl once said, "Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals." Power, money only makes people more of what they already are. It enables them to indulge every fantasy or perversion they can think of, or it becomes irrelevant. You've known a few people who work hard because they love to work. Are they cheap? Of course. Do they like a deal? Yes, just like everyone else. Wealthy people don't buy lottery tickets, not because they don't want the money. It's because the odds are so bad. Story 34. I had a very wealthy boss who really had no boundaries about 20 years ago. I worked at an art gallery and was paid literally peanuts. One night after a big party, I ended up at his house with an agent from out of town. I was just PR babysitting. I discovered all he had in his house to eat was champagne, a block of Parmesan, and cocaine. I left ASAP. He had me break up with women he invited up to his cabin for the weekend. One was a rockette who forgot her cell phone, and I had to priority FedEx it back to her. I also had his Chase Manhattan PIN numbers and dealt with his expenses. He's darn lucky I'm an honest person because I cannot stress to you enough, I was only 27. Story 35. The more money they have, the more problems they create to not pay you. Sign a contract, get a guarantee with clawbacks, and wait. Rich people are rich because they don't prefer to spend money, and they know they can out-litigate the little guy to avoid paying for it. CYA. Money nothing. If you don't get it up front, the wealthier they are, the more you should protect against them up front. Billionaire client, do a 70 up front and a 30 back end, and know who they trust to sign off. So if they aren't around, you can get that guy if they are off jet setting and unavailable. Best advice I can give. Story 36. Worked with finances of ultra wealthy. The darkest secret that I ran over was that the kids of the parents who built up their wealthy had messed up personalities, seemed to have no passion, substances addictions, empty on the inside to the extent that I could see. Story 37. Not me, but my parents. They went to school with a girl who was from a poor farm family and became rich after high school. The girl and her roommate were in college and created the first storyline of a very popular video game. She went to school for computer science and got a degree along with the royalties that came with selling said storyline. She worked for a company that purchased the storyline for a while and decided to retire early. My parents stayed in touch with her from time to time, but haven't seen her in many years until very recent, when her mother died from cancer. The last time she spoke to my mom, she became very lonely after having several relationships fail due to various reasons. She went into a bad depression and used some of her money to basically shelter herself away from other people. When my parents reconnected with her during her mother's funeral, they said she looked very aged and worn out, like she hasn't slept in years. Turned out she was on various depression and anxiety meds that weren't working well, and she stayed up for over 48 hours before the funeral. Her father said she was losing weight fast and told my parents the money changed her. It was evident she thinks and lives life one day at a time and hoping the day is done quickly so she can go to bed. It broke my parents' hearts knowing she became successful and yet struggles with her own insecurities and mental health issues herself. Story 38. In my past work, I met and spent time with celebrities, mostly singers. The old school people were the best. People like Ricky Skaggs and Merle Haggard were just people who sang for a living and happy that people enjoyed their work. So many new talent, Terry Clark, Taylor S., are supreme snobs. Dolly will sit and talk like you're in the office waiting for your appointment. Kelly Clarkson you can have. Story 39. I worked for a guy doing a remodel on one of his bedrooms. One day I was driving to his place and my truck broke down. I called to tell him I would be late due to break down. He sent me to the Ford dealership and put a F-150 on his AMX card, about $80K, and called it a bonus. Story 40. Had a friend who was an heiress to a family name you all would know. She was a granddaughter, not a daughter, so her wealth was not as great, but she was beyond comfortable. We went out for drinks one night, and I didn't have much money on me, so she spotted me a couple of rounds. The next day, I went over to repay her the $20 she had spent on me. She actually got emotional and said, "Nobody has ever paid me back before. They all figure she can afford it." This was in the 1980s, and I was making shoot money as a secretary, but I actually felt sorry for her. Story 41. Managed private golf, country, and sociality clubs for more than 2 decades. I have worked with, for, and befriended many of the top 1. They are just like us. Imagine your favorite. Happy-go-lucky, helpful best friend. Now give that friend the means to help anyone in the world. There are many like that. Imagine that nasty, spiteful bully from your high school or neighborhood who took joy in making the lives of others miserable. Now give them all the resources in the world to continue to do that. Yep, I've met them too. What am I most shocked by? The hypocrisy, most popular example, support fervent gun control, open borders, but often make use of armed guards, gated communities, etc. Also shocked about the anti-Semitic attitude I saw between liberal Jewish people and more Orthodox conservative Jewish people. One club I worked at, a lonely wife of a uber-wealthy man would leave uber expensive jewelry behind at the spa, gym, card room, I think, just because she wanted attention. Eventually, one of her RM watches was never found. I suspect I know who took it. I just hope she found a way to pawn it for 10 times her annual average salary. I probably have as many positive, uplifting stories as I do examples of miserable human beings from my experience. I will say I have never come to trust even the nicest ones to pick one of us normal folks over one of their fellow uber elite friends. Even if they know a friend acquaintance is in the wrong, they will never side with the help over one of their own. Story 42. My boss got mad by people offering him free money. Galas, diners, test drivers in cars yet to be launched, concerts, free stuffs. expensive wines, delicatesses, tickets to parks, etc., are all handled by her secretary because it annoyed him. People used to call offering to him be part of lucratives, already closed deals just to strengthen their relations with him. I saw it happens. It was in real estate bubble, but still, he was silent partner in some shade deals that just conclude after it proved to be lucrative. The insinuation of his name is what make the deal happen, so he make a profit before even investing his money. He complained about those things a lot while got more and more rich just because he was already rich. P.S. Beer, casinos, and telecommunications was his business. I worked as a waiter for him, and he loved me. What put me in troubles with his son and made me quit? Nashron, story 43. They are completely inept, but do not think they are. They can make a decision to save their lives and cannot fathom the idea of the working class reality losing all empathy for actual humans. They cannot understand the ease and privilege wealth gives them. They can afford to fail over and over again and always get more chances to make the same mistakes and not learn from them. It's been an interesting few years working for an ultra-wealthy person. Story 44. One of my best friends in my teens was the son of the one-time richest man in the region. They were completely normal other than their house's interior. There were at least a dozen other houses in their neighborhood better than theirs. It's quaint by today's standard of country club, but absolutely everything was best available. Commercial huge sub-zero refrigerators disguised as cabinetry, high flush toilets that were completely silent, a wired smart house as much as that existed in 1990, which is more than you think. Subtle touches, understated wealth, lots of accessory-type bland original art, like Audubon or landscapes. Mom drove a station wagon, Dad a Buick. They were generous and kind. They raised their kids to be accountable and treat people right. Dad was self-made, Mom's second-generation wealth. The actual billionaire I worked for was super cool, self-made. I had monthly meetings with him and about 16 others, and to see his ability to connect with hourly workers to senior executives was impressive. Story 45. Worked in the tech investor startup space. Ended up at WEF in Davos one year. I remember eating a 32 hamburger, listening to a man brag about influencing elections in developing nations to support his commercial interests. He spoke so casually, like he was sharing old college stories. He shared missteps he had made in his political schemes that had caused civil wars and lamented on the tens of thousands of lives that his errors had indirectly taken. Tipsy, at a bar on a mountain, he talked through literal crimes with the tone of someone who had effed it up at their day job. I remember that he believed it was his duty to influence, that whatever underlying meritocracy granted him enough power to buy elections also required him to guide the poor, silly populations underneath him. He left me with the check for his beer. Story 46. It's not a secret, but more like a fact. They have lifetime concierge taking care of all their life and mental load. Also, they use fake names all the time everywhere. Story 47. He only became a billionaire because of his dad's connections. If he was just your regular schmo on the street, he'd probably still be the front desk manager of a hotel. Story 48. Nothing exciting. Just being horrible business people driving their 5-generation family company into the ground because they grew up wealthy and refused to take advice from the people they hired to advise them. Buying or starting businesses they know nothing about, way overspend overpay for, think they can grow any kind of business because of their self-perceived operational and business expertise they think drove the success of other businesses they own that in reality got super lucky in a hot market. Then, paying the people that are giving them good advice and working their jerk off way under market, treat them like shoot generally, not believe in COVID and want them back on planes 4 times a week in September 2020. When they have an anti-immune disorder and aren't ready to come out the gate and get on a bunch of planes and stay at hotels. Story 49. My mom was a primary teacher in a European school that jillionaires around the world send their kids to. She was trying to teach kids to be considerate of the cleaning staff and not throw shoot on the ground. And she said the kids would reply with, "But my parents told me that making a mess is how we give these people jobs." Anyways, the parents started to complain that the mean teacher wouldn't let them make a mess. Another time, she and the principal called the parents of a kid with learning disabilities to discuss what kind of job the kid would be capable of having in the future. Mom blew a gasket from the insinuation that any child of hers would have to work a day in their lives. Story 50. Not a secret, but working in high-end luxury, pieces starting at 10 Kim. You realize that the ultra-wealth are incredibly tight with money sometimes. They expect things for free and discounts on account of how special and so much better they are. Story 51. Work for a few of them on high-end acquisitions, mostly classic cars. The guys in the 9+ digits for wealth go two very different ways. For 80 of them, they are down to earth and very nice to be around. Their problems are different than ours for sure, but the self-made ones are super chill. 10 are using me as a service to save time, and they go into it that way, like I never even speak to them. The last 10 treat everyone like staff, and they suck, and I change extra for being treated that way, even if they don't know it. People in the high 7 mid-8 digit net worth are all over the place. You have old money that is super cheap. You have new money that is trying to skip the line and wait to get a car that is in demand and think they don't have to pay over sticker. You have people like me who daily old F-150s because that is how they made their money. And they don't ever act out of how they were raised, right? Like everything, people are different. Second generation wealth can go suck an egg though. Most, if not all of them, are entitled brats. Story 52. They have family documents about rules and regulations as it pertains to who they are allowed to be social with. Story 53. Wealthy people are cheap sometimes. They will spend much a night for a hotel, but make sure the conversion rate when they are reimbursed matches their credit card statement. Can't miss those pennies. Will fly private, but not order food for the plane because it's too expensive. They have the places they like to go in every city and are very predictable. Story 54. Worked for a landscaping company who had some wealthy clients. One day, one of our customers, legit, talked about how we should line all poor people up and shoot them in the back of the head execution style. Like, dude, who do you think takes care of your lawn? I wasn't surprised by what he said. It just confirmed my suspicions. Story 55. Their days are, many times, filled with busy work and nonsense and can be quite boring. They would send me to find their little dog. It usually took me a couple of hours because the mansion was so large. This was nearly a daily thing. Story 56. Back in the day, worked on an estate for a celeb couple. Neurotic is an understatement. Phone calls at 4 a.m. saying I needed to go and buy organic lavender oil as she couldn't sleep. 8-hour round trip to deliver a bacon sandwich cooked by his own chef as he didn't like on-site catering. He was married to arguably one of the most beautiful women to have ever lived, had an awesome job, multi-millionaire, and was miserable as fudge. The second estate had old money husband. He had the title and land, but was cash poor. The wife is new money or would be new money when she inherited from her father. The difference in the way they dealt with money begged belief. She was spending too much and the accountant told her to reel it in. Her response was to fire the accountant. She expected me to sail her yacht for her on the weekend. No overtime because it's fun. I could go on for days. Answer. First estate was from the 1400s and used to be a secret Catholic stronghold. Secret chapel, the works. So the house had lots of priest holes, etc. There was a leaking downpipe. Anyway, the repair guys discovered an escape tunnel, which went to a nearby Dove Cote, and he wanted it sealed. No exploration as he didn't want the noise. So they had found a secret tunnel on his property, and he had zero interest. Like I said, miserable. There's more personal stuff, but NDAs would bite me. Story 57. I worked as an architectural designer for the incredibly rich. It was the least fulfilling position I ever had. Most of the builds were fifth vacation homes only their lawyers would use. I was told it gave them a tax break, though I still have no idea how. I had total design freedom in most cases, every designer's dream. I did a Japanese Hawaiian 50s surf theme in one kitchen with a vintage surfboard as the bar top. After a while, I started calling these palaces of dust because no one ever used them. Many were on a private ranch the firm managed, and the maintenance tasks were depressing to look at because of how obvious it was the properties were unused. And they were gorgeous. The very few clients who got personally involved were the reason I got out of high-end design. They would walk all over boundaries such as not calling in the middle of the night to tell me they decided they want the kitchen window back in its original position, pre-build. But the worst ended in 2 deaths. It was winter in an area where that really means something. This build was nearing completion, and the owner flew in unannounced on the day the home theater was being installed. The installers were coming from what would be a 45-minute drive in the summer and what the locals called the tragic end road to attempt with ice. The theater company attempted to cancel due to weather. I was told to call and let them know the owner was in town and they'd have to make it. I refused. A 20-year-old drafting assistant was given the task. She called and they agreed to send their guys. Some 20 minutes later, I was again told to call. This time I did, hoping they had changed their mind. Instead, I was given their cell numbers. I refused to call the guys in the car since I knew by that point they would be going through a canyon with black ice next to a river with no guardrail. The assistant called. They were on the way, but she let them know the owner was waiting. Then the other architectural designer called, then the assistant. I asked them not to, but the impatient owner trumped all. Then they stopped answering. They had hit a patch of black ice and careened into a ditch and a light pole. Speed was a factor. They both had families with young children. Neither the architectural firm nor the home theater company ever mentioned the phone calls to anyone. As for the owner, he was annoyed at the delay. Story 58. I have been acquainted with a few billionaires and several multimillionaires, most of them board members of nonprofit charities I have worked for. Nonprofit organizations in the U.S. must have boards, and the board members are usually wealthy individuals. Sorry to disappoint you, but some of these people were wonderful humans. Yes, some were jerks too, and most were somewhere in between, just like the rest of us. Most of them genuinely cared about the people these charities were reaching. You could tell by the questions they asked when I would give them a presentation. Sorry, I know it's uncool to fail to shoot on the wealthy, but I found them to be just like the rest of us in that some were total jerks, some were exemplary humans, and most were somewhere in between. Answer: I believe no matter what the income level, there will always be good people and not so good people. I've worked with a number of people in the social services field and also philanthropists who showed every sign of being virtuous people. They did a lot of good for others. Now, that being said, it was discovered later that one of these virtuous individuals, noted for a number of good works, charismatic, and well-known in the community, was a pedophile. They got away with it for many years. Because people can present very well. Many times you would never ever know. They were also quite wealthy and respected. Just saying. Story 59. I knew people who would buy multi-million-dollar homes in a resort area and live there for peak season 1, maybe 2 years, then sell them just as quickly for a huge profit. They considered that their jobs caused they would make hundreds of thousands just by holding a property for a year or two. Story 60. I spent 20 years of my life in France, and I'd love to know who that magician was, because I can't think of a single one who is better than half the people who perform in Vegas. Flying in a French chef? I can understand. But a French magician? That makes about as much sense as flying in a French rock and roll singer. Story 61. Married into one of these families. It's amazing. In every one of their homes, they have a soundproof room. Legit soundproof. Professionals came in and made sure you walk in and the noise of the world just sucks out as the door closes is surreal and feels like a sci-fi room. They're super trippy. It's for someone in the family to go into and just scream and scream and scream until they feel better. We all know who it's not a family secret, but we don't talk about it. Weird kind of pressures when you are that wealthy. They hold it well until they don't. That's why they have the scream rooms. Story 62. Currently working for owner of a professional athletics team in U.S. Guy is nice as heck to me and my team, but I have heard him speak to his wife in ways I would never dream to talk to a woman. Not seen actual violence, but verbal assault is putting it lightly. Story 63. They rarely pull permits for construction because it's more advantageous to pay a fine when caught, since that apparently doesn't flag the assessor, but a permit does. Story 64. They'll pay you big money to lie for them in court. Long story short, I refuse to testify that they didn't undercut the government and use substandard parts for a multi-million-dollar construction project. Story 65. We worked on an island with 2 major resorts catering to the wealthy. The one I worked for was full of rich people who were sick of hanging around rich people. We were allowed to socialize with them. Some of the wealthiest people I knew wore ratty shorts into shirts, fished for sea trout, not big game fish. The other resort was full of actors and musicians and new money. And when you really looked at them, the ones who were the worst people were the sort of wealthy millionaires who liked to be treated like they were billionaires. Someone on staff knocked up a rich guy's granddaughter once, and he sued the resort for a bundle. So the rule was they couldn't socialize with the guests. Their employee housing had their own bar and pool, but they had to be off grounds when not working, while I got to hang at our hotel pool and nightclub. Had a barcode on my car because I crewed on a boat part-time, so I would sneak in and bring my dates to the hot tubs of empty units until I got caught a few times. Crewed on their sightseeing boats too in the off-season, and because I wasn't afraid to talk to the guests, I got voted Employee of the Month 3 times. Unfortunately, I didn't actually work for that resort, just the boat, so I never got the bonus. The owner of the resort used to rub it into the employees. He doesn't even work here, and people like him better than you idiots. Now, the fancy resort had an automatic gratuity added to everything, and they would purposely start a rumor that Substance's dogs were scheduled to sweep employees' housing right after bonuses were paid. It got to be funny that new employees believed it. Story 66. He behaves very friendly when he is outside, but becomes very bad-tempered when there are no outsiders around at home, and often swears at people over trivial matters. Story 67. They're so much shittier than you could ever possibly believe. If you only knew, you wouldn't let your kids anywhere near them, and many of them are straight-up fudge pigs. Slobs. Story 68. I work in advertising for a few political candidates and a few brands. I won't name this. Well, because they're previous clients of my employer, and I also don't want to disappear. You would not imagine the amount of stuff that they have me put on this very platform that you are reading. Everything from creating sock puppet accounts to FUD their competition, even going as far as to create fake news articles and share them all over the internet. There are websites out there that allow you to upvote and manipulate comments as well as purchase Reddit accounts. Wealthy people buy their fame. You can buy the cover of Forbes magazine. Everything to get featured has a price for sale. Some companies don't disclose this publicly, but there are lists with prices in order to get into any publication that you want. Once you're in those publications, people believe whatever you've written is true. They've even gone as far as to have me create accounts with homosexuals, transgenders, black people, and create racial and intimacy division inside the comments. It's a very sick world we live in. So I hope that you can eat your breakfast after reading this. Story 69. Their deepest secret? That despite all the private jets and champagne, they're some of the loneliest, most paranoid people you'll ever meet. Story 70. I worked as an assistant to a billionaire's. One family in the Middle East and one single man in London. Used private jets to move around furniture and art. Generally, both of these people preferred first-class commercial for long haul. The nannies even travel first. You are in a special club if you are top 100 customers of Emirates Airline, and the perks are huge. You are looking at a huge personal staff headcount. Each property would have 4 to 8 live and staff members, add in driver's assistants, etc. Personal staff easily reach 30. Not uncommon for a husband and wife duo to co-manage a property. We had a book of credit cards for purchases in different currencies. You cannot say no to these people ever. That has been a consistent with the ultra-wealthy. Mara, the man in London, had 2 women who had a child each with. Both had beautiful large townhouses and full staff. Everything set up for them. One of the lady, her spending account would hover at 300K GBP. It was our job to keep it at that level. She was so lazy, she would send her child's iPad to the office for me to download games on. Still expect discounts frequently? Other times, money is just no issue, so we would sometimes send housekeepers on commercial flights if we wanted something moved very quickly. Moving expensive art is a total pain in the jerk. You have to insure it to take it off the wall and transport it. Story 71. I design in home bathrooms, kitchens. I dislike going to mansions of the mega rich. They are the cheapest, most annoying people. They don't respect your time. It takes hours to design a bathroom or a kitchen. Middle class get excited and want to go through with the purchase after. Get financed or whatnot. These rich pricks, they are the worst. I just left a $8 million lake house. Drove 2 hours to get there. Dude told me don't waste his time and give him a ballpark of the cheapest bathroom. Told him $15K and he said it's out of his budget. LOL estimation. Story 72. No matter how much money you have, you can't fix dementia. Our health is the most valuable thing we have. Story 73. I was a substance abuse counselor in Southeast Asia for almost a decade. I've met quite a few billionaires and got through many counseling sessions. I think I've gotten quite a good picture of the ultra-wealthy and their families. My main takeaway is that they just do not care about the rest of us. It's solely about wealth preservation. I've seen how they treat others, their PAs, our support staff, and it was always void of seeing their humanity. They only fear few things, but mainly time. They fear passing and the end of their mortal life. They fear parents, siblings, uncles, or whatever family member who can take away even a smidge of their wealthy. They get away with take down as if it's nothing. I spoke with one young man whose father is one of the richest people in Hong Kong who eliminate 2 people, one in a driving accident and one he shot dead. People were paid off and nothing came of it. Later in life, I came to read Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Freire. In it, he states that not only are the oppressed victims of oppression done by the oppressors, so are the oppressors victim of the system, as oppressing other robs you of your humanity. I full-heartedly agree with this statement. Story 74. People are not going to like this, but stealth wealth is a lie. They only do that in front of the camera Because a normal person would much rather buy a product that profits a CEO living a normal life rather than profiting a CEO that takes 10-minute jet rides. In private events, they love to show off more than anyone else. Everyone is wearing a RM that costs between an average home to a mega yacht. Story 75. I had an extremely wealthy uncle who passed last year. Houses everywhere, private jets, yes, jets plural, boats, cars, etc. He had all this, but generally his vehicles were not flashy. When I was a kid, I got a poster of a Ferrari Testarossa at my school book fair. Next time I saw my uncle, I was telling him he should get a Ferrari. He said he'd never get one. I asked why, and he said because it's too flashy. He said he didn't want to advertise his wealth because it puts people in danger. I didn't know what he meant until years later. Around the time he told me that as a kid, there was a big story about a Canadian billionaire whose daughter was kidnapped for ransom. They were targeted purely because of their wealth. So I can only surmise that was what influenced him to say what he did all those years ago. But something else he said that time had remained in my head my entire life. He said a real rich person doesn't advertise it with a loud, flashy car. He doesn't need to advertise his wealth because he knows he's wealthy and has nothing to prove. Someone who is trying too hard or is insecure needs the flashy car. They have to advertise their money to make themselves feel better. I've seen this just in the streets, dudes, with a Ferrari or Bugatti or something, and someone pulls up next to them in a Mustang or an old Corvette revving and wanting to race, and the Ferrari or Bugatti guy just doesn't take the bait. Why would he? It's quite apparent his car would smoke them. Who would he be trying to impress exactly? Life is good to a lot of these people, so why act like a wanker? Obviously, there are tons of rich assholes. I just found my uncle's philosophy on this interesting. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.